Good morning, Boker Tov. So nice to see you all. Why do we celebrate Lag BaOmer? What is significant about the day? What compels hundreds of thousands of Israelis to spend hours traveling in cars and on buses, sitting in traffic, going up to Meron, to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? Why all the bonfires? Already from Pesach, the kids in my neighborhood here in Har Nof collect branches and twigs and even furniture, anything that will burn, in order to light those bonfires on Lag BaOmer. Is it related to the yahrzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? What are we celebrating exactly? So this morning, I'd like to explore together with you the historicity of Lag BaOmer. And we'll see that, in fact, the development and the history of Lag BaOmer is quite hazy, cloudy, nebulous. As we would say in modern Hebrew, מאוד מעורפל, very hazy. And I'd also like to understand Lag BaOmer in the context of Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim, because this new holiday, so to speak, of Lag BaOmer finds itself sandwiched so nicely right in between these two other new holidays of Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim. So I'd like to, together with you, try and understand Lag BaOmer in the context of Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim, these two bookends, so to speak, which surround Lag BaOmer. Now it's interesting, Lag BaOmer is not mentioned anywhere in Mishnah. It's not mentioned in the Gemara. It's not mentioned anywhere in the Talmudic or Midrashic literature. It's not even mentioned in the Zohar. Many assume it's mentioned in the Zohar. No. Lag BaOmer doesn't appear as a date of significance even in the Zoharic literature. So where does the date come from? Where does Lag BaOmer come from? So I'll look together with you at a number of sources this morning. I'll put the source sheets here up on the screen. One moment, let me share screen. How do I do that? Okay, no, it's not working. Try this again. Share screen. Bear with me, I'm still learning. Okay, got it. Okay, everyone should see the source sheets now. Here, Deconstructing the Myth and Mystery of Lag BaOmer. So take a look at source number one. This is a famous passage in the Gemara in Yevamot and Daf Samach Bet. Now, the point of departure for the Gemara is a statement of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva Omer. Rabbi Akiva says, "Lamad Torah b'yalduto, yilmod Torah b'ziknuto." One should learn Torah in their youth and study Torah in their old age. Hayulo, and so the Gemara continues with the statement of Rabbi Akiva. Hayulo talmidim b'yalduto. Person has students in their youth. Yulo talmidim b'ziknuto. Similarly, a person should raise up students in their old age as well. And the Gemara brings up pasuk baboker zrat zarecha. In the morning you shall sow your seed, and the pasuk continues, and in the evening you shall not put down your hand. Meaning you gotta continue. You gotta continue. Yeah, the Gemara there, by the way, also says that a person should continue to have children. Okay, which is assumed to be the source that perhaps there's a mitzvah to have children beyond the fulfillment of the mitzvah minhat Torah to have one boy and one girl. But the Gemara continues and relates, Amru, they said, Shneim asar elev zugim talmidim hayulo l'Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students. Migivat ad Antipras, from Givat to Antipatras, v'kulam meitu beperek echad mipnei shelo nagu kavod ze lazeh. And they all died in this one period because they did not give respect to one another. This is, again, a Gemara that we're all familiar with. V'haya ha'olam shamem, and the world was empty. The world was bereft of Torah. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva eitzel rabbeinu shebadarom, until Rabbi Akiva went down to the rabbis in the south. That doesn't mean that he went down to the Negev, but maybe he went down to the southern Galil, which was the area at the time in the 2nd century, that was settled. V'shina lahem, and he taught at that time Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. He raised up these 5 students, and then the Gemara continues and relates, V'hem hem midu Torah otasha, And these 5 students, they upheld or really replenished the world of all the Torah that was lost. They upheld the Torah at that moment. The Gemara had told us that the world was shamein, the Mesorah was in jeopardy of being lost, and these 5 sages, they went and upheld the Torah at the time. Tana, it was taught, Kulametu mi Pesach ad Atzeret. It was taught that these 24,000 students, and there are other accounts and other sources that have other numbers, lower numbers, maybe it was only 12,000, maybe it was even less. But the Gemara here says that they all died from Pesach until Atzeret. Atzeret, of course, is Shavuot. There are other Girsaot, variant readings, other versions that have it ad pros Atzeret. Mi Pesach ad pros, pros meaning somewhere close to Atzeret or partially there, partial, not that they died all the way from Pesach until Shavuot, but they stopped dying somewhere between Pesach and Shavuot, ad pros Atzeret. Okay, and that's important for our discussion, and you'll see why in a moment. But no mention of Lag BaOmer. Right? So everyone who says, well, the Gemara says the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying on Lag BaOmer, that does not appear in the Gemara. The earliest reference to Lag BaOmer as a date of significance, at least in what is extant, in what we have in front of us, comes from 13th century Provence. And so here in source number 2, I put an excerpt from the Sefer HaManhig. Okay, here in source number 2, the Sefer HaManhig of Rav Avram ben Natan HaYarchi. He was born in Lunel in Provence. Lunel, lunar, moon, Yareach, hence the appellation Hayarchi. He lived from 1155 to 1215 and eventually moves from Provence to Spain. And he quotes another of the Chachmei Provence, Rabbi Zerachia Halevi, the Baal HaMaor, who lives about a century prior in the 12th century. Okay, so take a look at source number 2. V'ach minhag b'Tzarfat u'b'Provencia liknos milag ba'omer ve'elach. There's a minhag in France and in Provence, which is in the south of France, between France and Spain, to come together on Lag BaOmer. Okay, and we'll see what that means. V'shamati b'shem Rabbi Zerachia Halevi Zal miGerunda, Rabbi Zerachia Halevi, the Baal HaMaor of Gerona, Shematzak Katuv b'Sefer Yashan Haba Misfarad, who found an earlier work from Spain, Shemetu mi Pesach v'ad pros Hatzer. As I mentioned before, there are Girsaot that some of the Gaonim and the Rishonim have, that Girsaot versions of our Gemara, that the students stopped dying pros Hatzer, before Shavuot. Okay, Umay Pursa Palga Kidetnan Sholim B'Hilchot Pesach Kodem LaPesach Lamed Yom Shloshim Yom Upalga Tet Vav Yom. What is pros? What is partial? Okay, he says partial is 15 days. Tet Vav Yom Kodem Atzeret Zeu Lag BaOmer, and 15 days before Shavuot is Lag BaOmer. I put here in source number 3 another source from 13th century Provence. This is the Beit HaBechira of the Meiri. The Meiri, of course, you're all familiar with, lives from 1249 to 1315, one of the great Rishonim. And the Meiri, on the Gemara that we began with, writes, V'talmidim elu huskar kan, these students of Rabbi Akiva that are mentioned here, shekulam meitu mi Pesach v'ad Atzeret, who died between Pesach and Atzeret, Shavuot, v'kabala b'yad hagonim, he says there's a tradition going back already to the Gaonim. It's not clear whether he means the rabbis that we would call the Gaonim, the Gaonic period. He means the earlier rabbis. There's a tradition going back. We have, he writes, Shabiyom Lamed Gimel Ba'omer Paska Hamita. Oh, okay, that's significant. So the Meiri is the first one to mention that on Lag BaOmer, that's when the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying. We have this tradition that on the 33rd day of the Omer, Paska Hamita, the students stopped dying. V'noagim mitoch kach, and therefore the custom is, he writes, shalolit anodbo, we don't fast on Lag BaOmer. V'chein noagim mitoch kach shaloli sa'isha mi Pesach ad oto zman. And similarly, he writes that the custom is that we don't have weddings, we don't marry from Pesach until that time, meaning until Lag BaOmer. So what he's saying is that we have this tradition that goes back some time, that the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying on Lag BaOmer, and therefore the customs of mourning that are observed during this period, that are attributed to the death of the students of Rabbi Akiva, they are suspended on Lag BaOmer. Okay, that we observe these customs of mourning from Pesach until Lag BaOmer, because on Lag BaOmer, Paska Hamita, the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying. That's the tradition that the Meiri records here in source number 3. And the Shulchan Aruch also records this tradition here in source number 4. The Orach Chaim Taf Tzadi Gimel, he writes in Seif Aleph. You should all be able to see the sources in front of you. Okay. Noagim shelo lisa isha ben Pesach la'atzeret ad Lag BaOmer mipnei shebeoto zman metu talmidei Rabbi Akiva. Again, the Shulchan Aruch records this tradition that we don't allow weddings during what we call, let's say, the first half of Sfira from Pesach until Lag BaOmer. Of course, there are different customs. Okay, we'll get into why that might be. Because, as the Shulchan Aruch records, during this time, the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped, the students of Rabbi Akiva were dying. Okay, and on Lag BaOmer, they stopped dying. The Rama adds, Milag BaOmer ve'elach hakol shari. From Lag BaOmer and on, everything is permissible. But there's an interesting machloket between the Shulchan Aruch and the Rama in Seif Bet, because if the students stopped dying on the 33rd day of the Omer, that would imply that they were still dying on the 33rd day of the Omer. So some were still dying. So therefore, the Shulchan Aruch records the custom here in Seif Bet of getting haircuts and suspending the customs of mourning. That begins on the 34th day of the Omer. He writes, "Ve'en listaper ad yom lamed daled baboker." Why? Because the students stopped dying on the 33rd day, which means they were still dying on the 33rd day. So when do the customs of mourning, or when are the customs of mourning suspended? The Shulchan Aruch writes from the 34th day and on. That's the Sephardic custom. However, the Rama writes, no, Elu, in our lands, already from the 33rd day, you can get a haircut. We don't follow that custom that is recorded in the Shulchan Aruch, waiting till the 34th day. Already on the 33rd day, you can get a haircut. And what he writes next is significant for our discussion this morning. And we have make a little simcha. It's a little joyous. And you don't say tachanun on Lag BaOmer. Now, what does he mean that we have a little simcha? We are a little happy. Marbim bo ktsat simcha. We have a little festivities. Doesn't record why that is. Doesn't associate anything with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Doesn't mention Meiron, right? Doesn't mention anything to do with bonfires or bows and arrows or cookouts or Yom Sport, as they used to have in school. He just says there's a little simcha. Why is that? Is that because the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying? It's not clear exactly what the Rama means. Okay, but no mention of major celebrations, no mention of pilgrimages up to Meiron, no mentions of Chalakeh, of getting haircuts, or giving the kids, rather, the 3-year-old boys haircuts, no mention of dancing, of singing, of studying the Zohar. Where does that come from? And how do we get from suspending the customs of mourning, right? Saying, okay, the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying. By the way, I have to mention here, just as an aside, that many have pointed out that much of the customs of mourning that we observe today actually come later, following the first Crusades of 1096 and following the Khmelnytsky massacres in Poland in the 17th century, the mid-17th century. And that may explain why there's this alternative practice to begin the customs of mourning from the beginning of the month of Iyar all the way until Shavuot. As some have explained, because that's when the first Crusades of 1096 decimated the Jewish communities of what we call Kilot Shum. Spire, worms, and mites. Speyer, vermeisen, magentia. That would explain why there's this alternative custom. And as you know, right, that's why even on a Shabbat where you might not say Av HaRachamim, during this period we do say Av HaRachamim, which was composed for the martyrs, etc. So there's a lot to say about that, but that's for another time. But I just wanted to point that out because we attribute much of the customs of mourning during this period to the students of Rabbi Akiva, but actually a lot of them come later on. They're kind of tagged on later. But in any case, for our purposes here, we're talking about the students of Rabbi Akiva. So how do we go from suspending the customs of mourning on Lag BaOmer and saying that the students stop dying, so we're no longer observing customs of mourning, we can get married and we can get a haircut and we can listen to live music and dance, etc. How do we go from that to bonfires and pilgrimages and the Hilula of Rashbi? So take a look here at source number 5. This is from the Shar HaKavanot of Rabbi Chaim Vital. This is part of the Kitvei Ha'ari. Now, if you ask anyone what Lag BaOmer celebrates, they'll tell you it's the Yahrzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's the Hilula of Rashbi. It's the anniversary of Rashbi's death. Okay, and that's why we go up to the kever of Rashbi, Meron, and dance and sing Bar Yochai, Nimshachta Ashrecha, and that's why people study the Zohar, which is attributed to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The authorship of the Zohar is attributed to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's also a whole separate conversation, not for now. So if you ask anyone, what are we celebrating on Lag BaOmer, they'll tell you we're celebrating the death of, or the anniversary of the death of Rashbi, the Yahrzeit of Rashbi, which is more than just his death. It's referred to as a Hilula. It's a celebration. It's a wedding, so to speak. It's the day that his soul wedded heaven, if you will. But the whole notion of it being the Yahrzeit of Rashbi is also very unclear. As I mentioned at the outset, the history of Lag BaOmer is ma'od murpal, very hazy, very cloudy, very nebulous. And it seems to be based on a printer's error. The association of Lag BaOmer with the Yahrzeit of Rashbi is based on a printer's error. So take a look here at source number 5. Okay, this is from the Shar HaKavanot. Now you have a similar passage in a few different places in the Kitvei Ha'ari, the writings of the Ari. His teachings were recorded, of course, by his primary student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, who lived from 1542 to 1620. And here we have a description of what the Ari HaKadosh did on Lag BaOmer. Okay, very important source for our purposes this morning, for our discussion this morning. And here, if you look at where I've underlined, Lag BaOmer is not called the Yahrzeit of Rashbi, but it's called the Yom Mishteh V'Simcha, or Yom Simchatenu, the day of our rejoicing, or the Yom Simchat Rashbi, the day of the joy of Rashbi. And what's fascinating is that the text got corrupted. It was an abbreviated text. And the word simcha, Yom Simchat Rashbi, Yom Simchato, Yom Simchatenu, becomes abbreviated as Shin Mem, and erroneously gets printed as Yom Shemet Rashbi, instead of Yom Simchat Rashbi, which appears in a number of different places in the Kitvei Ari, in the context of Lag BaOmer, the day of his rejoicing, the day of his joy. Okay, that becomes corrupted and mistakenly, in error, it's again a printer's error, becomes printed as Yom Shemet Rashbi, or Yom Shemet Bo Rashbi. But in the original manuscripts, it's just as it appears here. Yom Simchat Rashbi, Yom Simchatenu, Zman Simchato here, Zman Simchato B'Yom Lamed Gimel LaOmer. Remember, printing was very expensive. You had to pay someone, a typesetter, to individually place every single letter. And so it was very common for them to use abbreviations, to abbreviate words. It saved time, it saved money. But this is what appears in the original manuscripts. It's Yom Simchato, Yom Simchat Rashbi, the day of his joy, the day of his rejoicing, which, as I mentioned, becomes Yom Shemet Bo Rashbi in some printed editions. So associating the day of his death with Lag BaOmer would appear to be a printing error, a printer's error, a scribal error, a printer, what we call a Tod Sofer. Okay, and the original manuscripts, as I mentioned, appear as I've placed it for you on the source sheets. Now, some explain, they'll dismiss this. They'll say, well, that's not a stira, right? That's not a contradiction. It doesn't pose a problem, because maybe Simcha, the day of his joy, the day of his rejoicing, is his death. After all, we call his death a hilula. The death of a tzaddik, a righteous individual, is called a hilula. It's a celebration. It's a wedding. It's the day when his soul wedded heaven, so to speak. And they go even further, and they explain that in the Zohar, in the Idra Zuta, his death is called a hilula, and before his death, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai experiences this great elevation and great elation, great joy, and reveals the deepest depths, the deepest secrets of the Torah, the deepest mysteries of mysticism. And that is his joy, that is his simcha. So they'll tell you, right, don't interpret Yom Simcha as another day. No, Yom Simcha, the intent of Yom Simchato, or Yom Simchatenu, or Zman Simchato, is his death. That's the intent here of the text. Okay, but again, that's not clear. I'd like to actually examine this together with you, because some of the customs that we associate with Lag BaOmer appear first here in the Kitvei Ha'ari. So he writes the following here in source number 5. Inyan minhag shenagu Yisrael alechet biyom lamed gimel la'omer al kivei Rashbi v'Rebbe Elazar beno asher kvurim be'ir Meiron kinoda. The custom that is observed by Israel, by the Jewish people, to go on Lag BaOmer to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Elazar, his son, in the city of Meiron, as is known, ve'ochlim ve'shotim u'smeichim, and eating and drinking and feasting and celebrating. Sham, there, ani ra'iti l'morizal, I saw my Rebbe. This is Rabbi Chaim Vital describing how his Rebbe, the Ari HaKadosh, Shalach l'sham pam achat b'yom lamed gimel la'omer. He went there once on Lag BaOmer. And this is the first description of a pilgrimage to the Kever Rashbi on Lag BaOmer. This is the earliest source that describes such a pilgrimage. Hu v'kol anshe beito, so he and all the members of his household. V'yashav sham shlosha yamim. He spent 3 full days there. Okay? And just for the sake of time, I'll skip to where I've underlined. And he writes, okay, that the year before, right, he heard testimony from someone else that the year before, Shalachti ani etzlo lilmod imorizal sholich et beno hakatan, that the previous year, the Ari HaKadosh went there to learn Torah, where actually the one who's relating this went there to learn together with his Rebbe, the Ari HaKadosh. Sholich et beno hakatan sham im kol anshe beito, that he took his little son, his small child, together with all the members of his household, v'sham gilcho et rosho, kiminhag hayadua, and there he shaved his head, he cut his hair, meaning the hair of the young child, as is the known custom. V'asah sham yom mishteh v'simcha, and he made there a great feast, a day of feasting and rejoicing. Right? This is perhaps one of the early sources for the chalaket, or the upshearing, and to dafka do it by the grave of Rashbi on Lag BaOmer. And then what comes next is a startling story, but it's important for our discussion this morning. Okay, so far we've seen an early, perhaps the earliest reference to a pilgrimage on Lag BaOmer to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, as well as the chalake, the upshir. Gam Heid, Rabbi Avraham Halevi, ki b'shana niskeret halach gam hu sham. Another testimony that someone else went there. V'haya noheg lomar b'chol yom b'virkat tishkon nachem Hashem Elokeinu et avelit Zion. interesting. Here we have a story about this Rabbi Avram Halevi, who had this custom to recite the prayer of Nachem, where we ask Hashem to comfort and console us and the mourners of Tzion, a prayer that we insert into the Mincha on Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of Av, when we mourn the destruction of the Holy Temple. There was an individual who mourned for the temple every single day and inserted this prayer every single day. V'gam biyoto sham amar Nachem. And when he was there at the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, together with the Ari Kadosh, as they're celebrating, as they're feasting, this Rabbi Avram Halevi was saying this Nachem. Okay? And following the Amidah, I guess maybe he was the Shilech Tzibor, right? How else would the Ari know that he added Nachem to his Amidah? Could be that, he was the Shilech Tzibor. Maybe he had a yahrzeit or something. He also had a yahrzeit on Lag BaOmer. So Amarle Morizal, so he's relating that the Ari HaKadosh said to him, Ki ra'a beikitz et Rashbi alav shalom omer al kivro ve'amar lo amor el ha'ish hazeh Avram Halevi ki lama omer nachem b'yom simchatenu. So the Ari related that following the Amidah, he saw that Rabbi Shimon got up, he awoke from his grave and stood on his grave. There's this vision of Rashbi, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, awakening, getting up from his grave, standing on his grave, and say to this man, Emor el ha'ish hazeh, this Avram Halevi, why does he say Nachem? Why does he say this prayer, asking Hashem for consolation and comfort, which we say on Tisha B'Av, our national day of mourning? Why does it say it biyom simchatenu, on the day of our rejoicing? V'hinei lachen hu yeh b'nachama b'karov. And Rabbi Shimon curses him, so to speak, according to what the Ari is relating here, and says, therefore, this individual, he will have to receive comfort very shortly. Okay, what does that mean? So the story continues. V'lo yatsa chodesh yamim ad she'met lo ben echad. Wow. And it wasn't but 30 days later, a month didn't pass before this individual lost one of his sons, and indeed had to receive tanchumim, had to receive comfort, consolation from the community. Wow. And he concludes, "V'katavti kol zeh lohorot ki yesh shorish b'min hagazeh haniskar." Rabbi Chaim Vital is writing that he's recorded all this in order to teach that there is a source to this custom of celebrating Lag BaOmer. Okay? Ubi prat, and we'll come back to this idea. It's interesting. And specifically, Ki Rashbi alav shalom hu michamishat talmidav hagdolim shel Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was one of the 5 great students of Rabbi Akiva that we saw in the Gemara in Yevamot and Daf Samach Bet, which records how Rabbi Akiva, after losing his students, goes down to the rabbis in the south and raises up 5 students. The greatest of them, perhaps, is Rabbi Shimon. Okay, V'lachein, therefore, Zman Simchato biyom Lamed Gimel LaOmer. Therefore, the time of his rejoicing is on Lag BaOmer, or Lag LaOmer, Kifi Ma Shebi'er La'el, biyom Lamed LaOmer, Lamed Gimel LaOmer. Okay, as I've explained previously. So what Rabbi Chaim Vital is saying, or seems to be saying here towards the end, is that the simcha, the joy of Lag BaOmer is not associated with the yahrzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, but instead it's associated with the fact that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was one of the 5 students of Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara in Yevamot that we began with, that related how Rabbi Akiva lost all of his students and went down to the rabbis in the south and raised up 5 students, the greatest of which perhaps is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So Rabbi Chaim Vital at the very end associates the simcha, this great joy of Lag BaOmer, with the fact that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai went ahead and replenished the world of Torah, went ahead and continued that flame, so to speak, when the Masorah was in jeopardy. And that's crucial. Because as I mentioned, those who associate Lag BaOmer with the death of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, or the anniversary of his death, his yahrzeit, very, very difficult. Very difficult. That would be rooted in a printer's error. Yom Simchato, the word Simcha becomes Yom Shemet Rashbi, okay, in some editions, but the original manuscripts have it Simcha, joy. And even, by the way, some of the great Kabbalists attested to the fact that Lag BaOmer was not, or is not, the anniversary of the death of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, is not his yahrzeit. You know, in some places, if you go around and you tell them that Lag BaOmer is not the yahrzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they'll call you an apikares, they'll put you in chayrim. But some of the great Kabbalists of the 18th and 19th centuries believed that it was not his yahrzeit, and explained Simcha in other ways, and explained this passage in the Kitvei Ha'ari in other ways. The Chida, for example, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, who lived from 1724 to 1806, and he was a great Kabbalist, a great legalist, a halachist, a posek, wrote many, many Sfarim, huge Talmud Chacham, one of the great Achronim, one of the great Gaonim of the contemporary period. And he was a bibliophile as well, as is well known, traveled raising money for the Yeshuv here in the land of Israel, which allowed him access to the great libraries of Europe. And so he was an expert in manuscripts and an expert in variant readings and Girsa'ot and different editions. And the Chida points out, just as we did this morning, that it's not the day in which Rabbi Shimon died, Yom Shemet Rashbi, it's rather Yom Simchat Rashbi. The Ben Ish Chai, also another great Kabbalist, lives from 1835 to 1909. Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, he also believed that Lag BaOmer was not the anniversary of the death of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It was not his yahrzeit. So two of the greatest Kabbalists of the 18th and 19th century, 18th and 19th centuries concur that this is not the yahrzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So what do they say, or what do others say is being celebrated here? Well, as we mentioned, maybe it's celebrating, as the Chida assumes, the day when he began to learn with Rabbi Akiva. Some say it was the day he received smicha from Rabbi Akiva. Some explain it was the day he emerged from the cave. As we saw from the end of this passage here in the Shara Kavanot, source number 5, the simcha here would be associated with the fact that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is one of the 5 students that Rabbi Akiva taught following the death of all of his other students. So it makes sense that what we're celebrating is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's life, the continuity of the Mesorah, the fact that he learned from Rabbi Akiva. If this period is associated with Rabbi Akiva and his students, and Lag BaOmer is the day that the students stopped dying, so then the simcha that we're celebrating here is the simcha of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai as a student of Rabbi Akiva. That would make sense with the end of this passage. Okay. What's interesting, though, is we began with the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. The Shulchan Aruch was a contemporary of the Ari Kadosh and Rabbi Chaim Vital, and he doesn't make mention of this. Doesn't discuss Lag BaOmer as a day to celebrate Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So we have to ask the question: when does this really begin? When do people start making pilgrimages to Lag BaOmer, to Meiron on Lag BaOmer? When does Lag BaOmer begin to be celebrated as such? You see already in the 16th century, as being described here in source number 5, Rabbi Chaim Vital records how his Rebbe, the Ari Kadosh, goes up to Meiron. And Rabbi Chaim Vital records this. He says, I'm recording this for posterity because this is the source for this known minhag, this minhag. So it would seem that already by the 16th century, this practice has begun. But how does it really start? So that's one of our questions this morning. Okay, but we'll come back to that. Because Lag BaOmer historically was actually a fast day and a day of mourning on the Jewish calendar. Okay, we think of Lag BaOmer today as this great day of celebration and joy and pilgrimages, but as we'll see in a moment, historically, Lag BaOmer was observed as a fast day. The 18th of ER was observed as a fast day, a day of mourning, a day on which a couple of tragic events befell the Jewish people. And one of the passages that holds the key to understanding Lag BaOmer is here in source number 6, the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Taf Kuf Pei, at the very end of the laws of fasts. Okay? The Shulchan Aruch writes, Elu hayamim she'iru bahem tzarot la'avotenu, v'ra'ui litanot bahem. Here are a number of days where tzarot, where tragic events befell our forefathers, v'ra'ui litanot bahem, and it's proper litanot bahem to fast on them. Even though some of them fall out on Rosh Chodesh, like the first of Nisan, as we'll see in a moment, nevertheless, there is still a fast observed. However, if for whatever reason one is unable to fast, one is accustomed to fast on one of these days and is mashlim the fast, has to make the fast up, he should not do so on Rosh Chodesh. And the Shulchan Aruch continues with a whole litany, really a list of fast days that today are not really observed, except maybe for the 7th of Adar, which is both the birthday and the yahrzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is really today only observed by the Chevra Kadisha. They'll fast on the 7th of Adar, and on Motzei Zayin Adar, on the night following, they'll have usually a dinner in honor of the Chevra Kadisha, to honor them for the Chesed Shel Emet that they do, to give them a little chizuk. So, but historically, these days were days on which people fasted. The post can point out that today our makeup is different, our constitution is different. We are, of a weaker generation, so we're generally lenient when it comes to fast days and such. But historically, Jews fasted on these days, and there's a whole long list here in Seif Bet. You could say that in the past people didn't have too much food, so maybe it was easier for them to fast. Okay, there were many days when women and children used to fast. Again, things were different back then. But here are a list of tragic events on which the Harkaman instituted fast days. Okay, here's a whole list. On the 1st of Nisan, the students of Aaron, the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, died. Okay, we read about it not too long ago in Parashat Shmini. And on the 10th of Nisan, Meta Miriam v'nistaleka be'er. Miriam died and the well disappeared. Okay, Jewish people, of course, start complaining because they don't have water. By the way, I once performed a wedding on the 1st of Nisan, which is Rosh Chodesh, and usually if people get married on Rosh Chodesh, the custom is not to fast. Right? Traditionally, bride and groom fast on the day of their wedding, different reasons given. But if it's Rosh Chodesh, the custom is that they don't fast. However, if it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the custom is that they do fast, because Rosh Chodesh Nisan, as you see here, historically was a fast. It was the anniversary of the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, who died for bringing in Esh Zarasha. Let's see about that in Parashat Shmini. And here where I've underlined, this is significant. B'chavav bo meit Yehoshua bin Nun. On the 26th of Nisan, Yehoshua bin Nun died. Okay. Now, what does that have to do with our conversation this morning? So this list, and for homework, you could take a look at this. I mean, it's fascinating. It's so rich. You could give a whole class just on this passage in the Shulchan Aruch here. All these interesting dates and all sorts of interesting historical material surrounding these dates. But this is based on an earlier passage. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch here is collecting from earlier works, earlier passages, and we have a Geniza fragment that was found in recent years, which revealed that the original version of this passage, and the most authoritative version of this passage, has it that Yehoshua bin Nun died not on the 26th of Nisan, but on the 18th of ER, on Lag BaOmer. okay? So that would mean that historically, Lag BaOmer was actually a fast day. And there were Jews that fasted on Lag BaOmer on the 18th of Iyar, because that was the day when Yehoshua ben Nun died, okay? Now, if you say, well, okay, Rabbi, but today things are different, right? We celebrate the Yurtzeit of a tzaddik. We don't fast, right? We celebrate the Yurtzeit of a tzaddik as a hilula, as a tikkun. We make a l'chaim, right? In many places, they won't say tachanun if it's some Rebbe's Yurtzeit. I grew up in a shul in New Jersey. My family had been members of the shul for now it's over 100 years. My family came over from Europe, from Galicia in the early 20th century, the very early 20th century, with the great wave of immigration, and settled in Passaic, New Jersey, which was an old industrial city in New Jersey, a big immigrant community. And they davened in what was called the Galicianer Shul. The shul still exists. It's Tefereth Israel for anyone from Passaic, New Jersey. But it was known as the Galicianer Shul, and observed davened Nesach Sfard, and observed a lot of Hasidic customs, as did the Jews of Galicia. Ich bin a Galicianer. So we didn't say Tachanun at Mincha any day. And many mornings they would look at the calendar and say, oh, some Rebbe's Yurtzeit, no Tachanun. Okay, so we rarely said Tachanun. I grew up rarely saying Tachanun. Okay, I have to make up for it, I guess. But right, and then the old joke is that, should we say Tachanun? They look at the calendar. No Rebbe died. Oh, it's a simcha, it's a holiday. There's no Rebbe died today, no Tachanun. So they would never say Tachanun, that's the old joke. But some say, oh, so we celebrate the death of a tzaddik. It's the day when they return their soul to heaven. But you see that traditionally, a Yurtzeit was observed by fasting. In fact, many have the custom to fast on the Yurtzeit of a parent. And it's really only later, with the influence of Kabbalah and Chassidut, when the fast or the Yurtzeit of an individual becomes a celebration, becomes a hilula, tikkun, l'chaim. But historically, a Yurtzeit was a day of mourning and of fasting. Okay, so you see, based on that Geniza fragment, based on the earliest version of this passage here, the death of Rabbi Yehoshua, of Yehoshua ben Nun, was on Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer was the anniversary of his death, and therefore it was a fast day, not a day of celebration. Interesting. We're going to come back in a moment to this very rich passage. But another tragedy that happened on Lag BaOmer, in the 4th century, a day that will live in infamy, took place in the year 363. There was a Holy Roman Emperor by the name of Julian the Apostate, Julianus HaKofer in Hebrew, Julianus HaKofer, Julian the Apostate, who ruled from 361 to 363. Fascinating personality. Why was he called Julian the Apostate, the Kofer, right? Because he rejected Christianity and wanted to return the Roman Empire to paganism. It's only about 30 years before when Emperor Constantine, made the Holy Roman Empire Christian. And so Julian the Apostate wanted to return the Roman Empire to paganism, and hence he was called the Apostate. He didn't rule for very long, okay, only about 2 years. He dies in 363 under mysterious, suspicious. His death is somewhat suspicious, but it's assumed that he was assassinated, and it's easy to understand why. Now, he was very favorable to the Jews, and scholars debate exactly why that was. Why was he so favorable to the Jews? But the historical record records, we have this dialogue, this account, that in July of 362, as he's on his way to battle against the Persians, he meets with the Jewish leaders, or the leaders of the Jewish community, and asks them why they no longer offer animal sacrifice. Now, why would the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire be interested as to why the Jews are no longer offering animal sacrifice? Well, we can speculate that if he's interested in restoring the empire to the way things were before Christianity. He would be interested in restoring things the way they were during paganism, with animal sacrifice. So, he wants to know if the Jews are still doing it and why they're not still doing it, why they're not still continuing to offer animal sacrifices. And they explain to him, according to this account that we have, that they can no longer bring animal sacrifices because they don't have a holy temple in Jerusalem. So he makes this proclamation, much like Cyrus, allowing the Jews to return and rebuild Jerusalem, and to rebuild their holy temple and restore the avodah, restore the service in the holy temple. And there's a lot of speculation as to how much was planned, how much was put in place, if they actually began the plans to rebuild. But there was a major earthquake that took place May 18th, 19th of 363, which quickly dashed their plans. Historians associate this earthquake and then subsequently the assassination of Julian the Apostate with the fact that they were no longer able to build the Beit HaMikdash, that this earthquake was, this major event ultimately prevented them from rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash, and therefore it was a tragic day. And when did this take place? This took place on Lag BaOmer in the year 363 CE. So you see that historically Lag BaOmer was a fast day, okay, observed to mourn the anniversary of the death of Yoshua bin Nun. And from the 4th century on, it was a tragic day, a day of mourning. Okay, so how did it develop into what it is? How did it develop into what the Ari HaKadosh, or really Rabbi Chaim Vital, his student, is describing here in the Kitvei Ha'ari? And how did it develop into what it is today, with pilgrimages to Meron and bonfires and singing and dancing and celebrating? So there's been much scholarship on the topic. There's a lot published, a lot of ink has been spilled. I'll share with you two theories, two fascinating theories. The first is something that I've actually published on. It's fascinating. The historical record is rich with accounts of people going on Aliyah L'Regel, coming up to Jerusalem, even post-Hurban. It's fascinating. And in an article I wrote in Tchumen and in the Journal of Halacha and Contemporary Society, if you're interested, I show how even following the destruction of the Second Temple, there were Jews who continued to go on Aliyah L'Regel, make pilgrimages to Jerusalem for the regalim, specifically for the holiday of Shavuot. Okay, the historical record is rich with accounts of people coming dafka for Shavuot. You can imagine the weather would be a little more hospitable to coming for Shavuot, depending on where they're coming from. And in those articles in Tchumen and the Journal of Halacha and Contemporary Society, I also go on to discuss the halachic issues involved. Is there even a mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel nowadays, post-Hurban? But in any case, there's a theory that some scholars suggest that it was on or around Pesach Sheni and on or around the 18th of Iyar, Lag BaOmer, where people began to gather, again, on or around at this time, they began to gather in the north, around Meron, right, as a rendezvous point to then continue on down towards Jerusalem. People coming from the north, coming from different parts of the world, coming to the land of Israel, that Meron was basically a rendezvous point, and they would gather on or around Pesach Sheni or on or around Lag BaOmer, okay, this time of year, and they would rendezvous and they would then travel together towards Jerusalem. And that begins the pilgrimage up to Meron for Lag BaOmer. That's what some suggest. There are other theories as well, and I'd like to look together with you at a tshuva. Just look at really the first line of the tshuva of the Radbaz here. I'll put it up on the screen. Here in source number 8. Now, the Radbaz, Rabbi David ibn Shlomo ibn Zimra, a very important posek, lives in the 16th century, a contemporary of the Ariya Kadosh and Rabbi Chaim Vital and the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo. That's important in understanding this passage. The Radbaz, he lives in Egypt. He was a rabbi in Egypt, a rabbi in Jerusalem, a rabbi in Tzfat. He sat on the Beit Din of Rav Yosef Karo in Tzfat, and he wrote thousands of tshuvot. Very, very important posek, very important acharon. So he writes the following. Again, he's living at the same time as that scene that was described in the Kitvei Ha'ari that we saw a few moments ago. So he writes the following. This is just the beginning of a tshuva. Sha'alta mimeni, here in source number 8. I was asked, Odiach hadati b'mi shenadar legalechet bino b'makom Shmuel Hanavi. I was asked, make my opinion known. Someone who made a neder. There was a Jew who took a vow. He made a neder to cut his son's hair. B'makom Shmuel Hanavi. Interesting. At the place, or really the grave of Shmuel Hanavi, Nebe Samuel. Okay, the grave of Shmuel Hanavi. Uba, and he went there. Umatza shekvar nilkach biyad ha'akum be'onot. And he said, the Gentiles have already taken control of this area. We know exactly when this was historically. And they would not allow any Jews to gather there. Ma takana yeshlo. What can he do? What's his takana? In other words, he made a neder. He took a vow to cut his son's hair at the grave of Shmuel Hanavi, but now he can't get access to the grave of Shmuel Hanavi. What should he do? Right? Ma takana yeshlo. Right? Degam hakal v'chachamim hechmiru shelo yaleh l'sham shum yudi. And the community and even the rabbis, the sages, they are strict. They won't allow anyone to go there. Presumably, it was dangerous to go there. Okay, so that's the question that the Radbaz was asked. Now it's interesting. Again, this is taking place in the 16th century, around the same time as this description of how the Ariya Kadosh took his son up to Meron, up to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, to give his son a haircut. And here we have a description of Jews who are giving their children haircuts at the grave of Shmuel Hanavi. Now, what's that all about? Why were Jews giving their children haircuts at graves? Okay, that's a separate discussion for another time, but it's also a fascinating discussion, a rich discussion. The source of the minhag of the chalakeh, or the upsharon, giving a child a haircut, and where that comes from. That history also is very hazy, very blurry, very nebulous. Okay, but why at graves, and why dafka the grave of Shmuel Hanavi? Well, perhaps Shmuel Hanavi. It makes sense, at least thematically. Shmuel Hanavi is a Nazir, okay? Shmuel Hanavi was a Nazir, so maybe there's that connection. But it's possible that there were Jews who were maybe borrowing the custom from some other peoples. Again, I'm not going to go into that this morning. That's beyond the scope of our conversation this morning. But it's just a fascinating and rich discussion, the source of the chalakeh. That custom. But around the same time, right, you see a description of Jews giving their children, their small children, haircuts at the grave of Shmuel Hanavi. Now, it's interesting. If you'll go back, and I'll put it again on the screen, if you'll go back to that source in the Shulchan Aruch that we saw together, Taf Kuf Pei, he also mentions there that on Chavchet Bo, on the 28th day of Iyar, made Shmuel Hanavi. That is the Yertzeit of Shmuel Hanavi, the Yertzeit of Shmuel's death. Okay? Now, the Magen Avram here in source number 7 comments that actually we have a tradition that it was really the 29th of Iyar. Okay, but as you know, some people will actually go on Yom Yerushalayim on the 28th of Iyar to the grave of Shmuel Hanavi, because we have this tradition that that's when his Yertzeit was. So some scholars have suggested that maybe this is the origin of the pilgrimage up to Meron on Lag BaOmer. That initially there were Jews who were going in the 16th century, and maybe even prior, to the grave of Shmuel Hanavi. And then when they were no longer allowed access, here, as the Rabbi is describing, in the 16th century, when they were no longer allowed access to the grave of Shmuel Hanavi, so they went north. They took the custom and they appropriated it to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because they were not allowed access to the grave of Shmuel Hanavi. So the next best thing, so to speak. And according to some, that's how the pilgrimages up to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Lag BaOmer begin. Okay, again, that's what some have suggested. It's not unlike, for instance, as we know, here, before the founding of the State of Israel and after the founding of the State of Israel, when people could not get to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Meron, there were those who would go to the grave of Shimon HaTzadik here in Jerusalem. Okay, so I guess if you can't get to one Shimon, you go to another Shimon, but it's not unlike that practice. And some have suggested that that's how the pilgrimages to the pilgrimages on Lag BaOmer up to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai began. That initially there were Jews who were going to the grave of Shmuel Hanavi. They were no longer allowed access, so they just went north to Meron. Okay, that's another suggestion. Again, it's not clear exactly how Lag BaOmer becomes celebrated the way it does and becomes so popular. How does it go from what the Ramah records, Noagin bo k'tzat simcha, we have a little simcha, we don't say tachanan, the customs of mourning are suspended, to being celebrated as such. But over the centuries, it becomes this big celebration. It becomes almost like a Yom Tov, almost like a Chag for the Jewish people, which is something that the Chatam Sofer was very upset by. Okay? So here in source number 9, I put an excerpt from a tshuva of the Chatam Sofer in Yoredei Siman Reish Lamed Gimel. Now, there, the Chatam Sofer has a number of tshuvot where he discusses the sanctity of Eretz Yisrael and the sanctity, the Kedusha of Yerushalayim, and how even after the Churban, Eretz Yisrael retains its sanctity and Yerushalayim retains its sanctity, and the nafkaminot, the practical implications. And it's in that context that the Chatam Sofer is very critical of the observance of Lag BaOmer as a holiday. He has a very, very hard time with it. The Chatam Sofer lives from 1762 to 1839. 1762 to 1839. He was the Rav and Rosh Hashiva, of course, in Presburg, which today is Bratislava. And his first issue with celebrating Lag BaOmer is that they've turned Tzfat and Meron into what he calls a tel talpiot, a reference to Jerusalem. What he says is you've basically you've forsaken Jerusalem in favor of Tzfat and Meron. What about Yerushalayim, our holy city? Okay, you've transformed, you're celebrating these other cities. And we know that that's something that was, sort of a thorn in his side. In his drashot, we have printed a hesped, a eulogy that the Chatam Sofer writes following the devastating earthquake in Tzfat in 1837. And in that eulogy, you think, he's writing a eulogy, but in that eulogy, he indicts them and blames the earthquake on the fact that they had forsaken Jerusalem and instead are settling up in Tzfat and Meron in the north. Okay, so that's his first criticism. But then he continues and is very critical of establishing a holiday. And this is a crucial idea, so important, especially in discussing the establishment of Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim as holidays on the Jewish calendar. But he's very critical of establishing a Jewish holiday on a day where no miracle happened to the Jewish people. There were no nisim v'niflaot. And look where I've underlined. He writes, "Aval likboa moed shelo na'aseh bo nes v'lo huzkar b'shas poskim," to make a holiday like Lag BaOmer on a day when there's no miracle mentioned, and it's not even mentioned, as we began with, it's not mentioned in the Shas poskim, it's not mentioned in the Talmudic or rabbinic literature, not mentioned in the Midrashic literature even, it's not mentioned in the Shas poskim. B'shum makom v'remez remiza rak miniyat hesped v'tanit minagahi The only thing that's mentioned, as we saw, is the fact that we suspend the customs of mourning and that we don't fast, right? But he says even that is not clear, okay? Even that is not explicit in the Talmud. And then he continues, and it's such an important passage. He writes that establishing a day, he says the opposite. He says that establishing a day when there was no miracle that happened to the Jewish people, that is not allowed, right? Maybe he doesn't cite the Ramban, but the Ramban, in his commentary on the Torah, says that establishing a holiday on the Jewish calendar when one is not allowed to, okay? It's a whole discussion as to what that means, but maybe is an Isur of Bal Tosif, of adding to the Mitzvot HaTorah. It's an example that Ramban gives for Bal Tosif. But, so he first says it's wrong to establish a holiday when there was no miracle that happened to the Jewish people, but then he continues and he writes it's just the opposite, that we have a mitzvah min HaTorah to establish a day like Purim and Chanukah where we experience the miracle, where an individual or a community experiences the miracle. And he writes the following. Dikviyat Yom Moed b'Yom Asiyat Nes hu kal v'chomer d'oraita. He's basing himself on the Gemara and Megillah and Pesachim, but he says it's a kal v'chomer from a d'oraita. Yom Purim b'Yimei Chanukah d'oraita. Incredible. He says that the source for Purim, now Purim and Chanukah, of course, were established by the rabbis, instituted by the rabbis. They are holidays midrabanan. But he says, but the source of establishing a holiday on a day when the Jewish people, the Jewish community receive a miracle, experience a great salvation, that by its very root, at its very core, is a mitzvah min HaTorah, is a Torah obligation. Ach ma lasod bahem, but what you do on them, how you observe them, how you practice them, im lishmoch manot, if it's to give shalach manos, or ladlik nerot, or light candles on Chanukah, right? Or lasod zecher acher, maybe reading Megillah, having some other zecher, other remembrance, to recall the miracle. Zeu d'Rabbanan. That is rabbinic. One who doesn't do anything to remember Chanukah Purim, he says that they are over on a mitzvot aseh, min HaTorah, mitzvot aseh deoraita, because the source to celebrate such a day, to mark such a miracle, such a salvation, is min HaTorah, according to the Chatam Sofer. Achosa shum zecher yeh ma sheyeh al kol panim biyom echad mimei Chanukah va'afilu lo hitlik neirot v'lo shalach manot b'Purim kidome eno ela avaryan d'Rabbanan. But someone who doesn't give shalach manos, doesn't light candles, but they do something to recall the miracle, so then they've only violated a rabbinic mitzvah here. Fascinating source. And the Chatam Sofer in Orach Chaim Kuf Tzadi Aleph, he again records how there is a mitzvah to establish a holiday on a day on which an individual or a community experienced some miraculous salvation. And throughout Jewish history, we have tens of days like Purims, days called Purim Sheni, where Jewish communities throughout Jewish history experienced a salvation and established that day upon themselves and upon future generations as a day like Purim, as a holiday to be observed, to mark this miracle. We have the Chai Adam records this about his family, Tosfot Yom Tov, and many others. So there's this minhag throughout Jewish history to establish a holiday on a day when a Jewish community or an individual experiences a salvation. And the Chatam Sofer there in the Orach Chaim Kuf Tzadi Aleph, he writes that even though he and his Rebbe, Rav Natan Adler, were no longer living in Frankfurt, they both come from Frankfurt, they still observe Purim Frankfurt, or Purim Vincennes, which was established by the Jews of Frankfurt to recall and to commemorate this incredible Yeshua that they had. And even though they're no longer there in Frankfurt, they still commemorate this important day. So this has tremendous implications. Number one, the Chatam Sofer is very critical of the observance of Lag BaOmer because, according to him, at least, there was no miracle that took place on Lag BaOmer. Now, you'll tell this to some people and they'll say, no, of course there's a miracle. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is a miracle and Zohar is a miracle. But this is the Heilige Chatam Sofer. This is one of the most important Achronim speaking here. I mean, he's very critical of establishing a holiday on which no miracle befell the Jewish people. Okay? And then he says the opposite, that we have an obligation to establish or create a holiday like Purim on a day where we do see a miracle. And we'll come back to that moment. We'll come back to that notion, of that idea in a moment. You have other poskim, by the way, that are critical of Lag BaOmer, of the pilgrimages up to Meron, of some of the observances. One of the great achronim, the Shoel Umeshiv, of Yosef Shoel Nathanson. He's concerned with Bal Tashchit, as people are burning things that can be still used. People throw clothes into the fire. There's one Rebbe who throws his necktie into the fire. I guess the necktie, symbolizes Gashmiya, symbolizes physicality, symbolizes the West, Western culture and society. Chassidim don't wear a necktie, some explain because it separates the heart from the head, the emotions from the mind, the intellect. But I think it symbolizes Western culture and, all that represents. And so they throw it into the fire. Ovadia Yosef was concerned in his tshuvot with pritzut, with immodesty, with men and women mingling together. Although nowadays, if you've been to Meron, they keep men and women pretty much separated very well up there. But that's what he was concerned with, or one of his concerns. He's also concerned with shchita. I've never seen shchita when I've been up to Meron, but I suppose that once upon a time people would slaughter animals, and he's concerned with nevelot and treifot, and people are shechting and they're eating treif. In any case, other achronim take issue with Lag BaOmer, with going up to Meron. Some see it as Bittul Zman, you should be learning Torah. When asked why he didn't go up to Meron, Rav Elyashiv famously answered that he feels closer to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai by studying a Blat Gemara, opening up the Gemara, studying what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai has to say. For him, it was a greater experience than spending all the time traveling up to Meron. So you see that there are issues with Lag BaOmer, issues with the history of Lag BaOmer, with the establishment of Lag BaOmer. The Chatam Sofer and others have issues with observing Lag BaOmer. And so now that I've deconstructed the myth and mystery of Lag BaOmer and perhaps destroyed Lag BaOmer for you, Chas v'shalom, what is worth celebrating? What could we or should we celebrate on Lag BaOmer? What should we be thinking about on Lag BaOmer? And I'll come back to an idea that we mentioned before, that some say that Lag BaOmer represents how Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai began to study from Rabbi Akiva, how he emerges from the cave following the Romans persecuting him, the Gezeira against him and against maybe studying Torah, against him and his son, against what he said, but also against studying Torah. It represents maybe when he got smicha from Rabbi Akiva. So there's this connection between Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Lag BaOmer and the students of Rabbi Akiva. And so I think what's worth celebrating on Lag BaOmer is this idea of continuity. How, as we saw, the Gemara in Yevamot Daf Samach Bet describes how the world was shameim, it was empty, it was bereft of Torah. The Masorah was in jeopardy, our very Masorah. And Rabbi Akiva, he finds the courage to go on and raise up new students even in his old age, and to replenish the Torah that was lost, and to ensure the continuity of our Masorah. Now, if you recall, that was the very departure point, or point of departure for the Gemara in relating about the story, retelling the story of the death of the students of Rabbi Akiva. The point of departure for the Gemara was the fact that Rabbi Akiva himself said one should raise up students in his youth and raise up students in his old age. Rabbi Akiva could have retired, right? Rabbi Akiva could have collected a pension. Here he suffered a devastating blow. The death of all of his students, whether it was 24,000, whether it was more, whether it was less. Dibru Chachamim b'lashon kuzmar. Rabbis speak in exaggerations and hyperbole, and as I mentioned already, there are other sources that relate that there were less students that died. How they died, Gemara says, Askar, they died of a plague, diphtheria, a respiratory illness, right? Not unlike Rahman al-Islam, what we're seeing today, right? Very, very relevant. But according to some, actually, they died in battle during the Bar Kokhba revolt, which was between 132 and 135 of the Common Era, the revolt against the Romans. However they died, it was a devastating blow for Rabbi Akiva. He lost all of his students, but he still found the courage to go on. It represents this tremendous strength of spirit. The sages compare the Rebbe-Talmud relationship to the parent-child relationship, right? Vishinantam levanecha, vanecha elu talmidecha. And this is something that I personally can relate to, because when I was a young teacher, a newly minted teacher, I just started teaching, started my career. This is when we were living in New Jersey. I had two young students of mine that passed away. They passed away 3 years apart, but actually only 1 day apart. Ari Seidenfeld, Olav Shalom, who passed away on the 11th of Adar, and Aaron Haley, Olav Shalom, passed away on the 12th of Adar. 3 years apart, but 1 day apart. So I always mark their yard sites and make a siyum. And they passed away tragically and were taken at such a young and tender age. Yizichron Baruch. But I was in a tremendous amount of pain. This young, teacher wet behind his ears. But I drew strength from the great Rabbi Akiva, and I continue to draw strength from Rabbi Akiva, who had the courage to go on. And I think that's what we can celebrate on Lag BaOmer. Rabbi Akiva, after all, was a student of Nachum Ish Gamzu, right? Who, despite all of his afflictions, his mantra was, or his motto was, Gamzu L'Tova. Rabbi Akiva, too, was a man of tremendous faith. The Gemara in Brachot, and Daf Samech Aleph records that Rabbi Akiva had a similar mantra, Kol David Rachman Letav Avid. Everything that Hashem does is ultimately for the best. And the Gemara there relates how Rabbi Akiva was once traveling and he came to a certain city and he inquired about lodging but couldn't find a place to stay. And he said, okay, Kol David Rachman Letav Avid. Everything is for the best. Everything he does is for the best. And so he went and he slept in a field. And the Gemara relates that he had with him a rooster and a donkey and a candle. And a gust of wind came and blew out the candle. And a cat came and ate the rooster. And a lion came and ate the donkey. Oy vey. He didn't have anything left. But he said all the while, everything that Hashem does is for the best. And that night, an army came and took the city captive. And it turned out that Rabbi Akiva, who was alone in the field, wasn't given away. His location wasn't given away because he couldn't find lodging in the city. He had no candle, had no noisy rooster or donkey to give away his location. And so Rabbi Akiva was saved. And people asked him, what happened? How are you safe? And he said, because I told you, everything that Hashem does is for the best. I mean, we have that mantra of Rabbi Akiva is cited lahalacha in the Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch writes, "L'olam yadam ragil lomar kol David Rachman L'Tav." A person should be accustomed to reciting this, to saying this over, to feeling that everything that Hashem does is for the best. And we have the famous story at the very end of Masechet Makot, of course, of Rabbi Akiva, with the rabbis overlooking the Harabayit, and they see a wolf traipsing on the Makom of the Kodesh HaKodashim, right, the place where only the high priest could enter once a year, and he offers them words of chizuk, Kiva nichamtanu, Kiva nichamtanu, Kiva, you have comforted us, and so on and so forth. So many examples in the Gemara where Rabbi Akiva provides us with strength, with chizuk. He encourages us. And I think that's what we can celebrate on Lag BaOmer. The fact that Rabbi Akiva lost all of his students, but he went down to the rabbis in the south and he raised up 5 students. And the greatest of which is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, after all, is mentioned in every perek of the Talmud. There's not one chapter of Mishnah or Gemara that doesn't mention Rabbi Akiva. He's mentioned every chapter. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Shimon Bar Yochai is perhaps the greatest student of Rabbi Akiva and represents this continuity, this hemshechiyut, that the Masorah was in danger, was in jeopardy. Rabbi Akiva came along and had the strength, and that is worth celebrating. That's what we should celebrate on Lag BaOmer. Yes, the history is a little cloudy. The source is the historicity, but nevertheless, it's worth celebrating. I think it's a little ironic that some people, go crazy over Lag BaOmer, and hundreds of thousands every year go up to Meron. It's going to be interesting to see what happens this year. But even in previous years, when the Rabbanut HaRashit, the chief rabbinate, for example, said, don't go up to Meron because Lag BaOmer fell out on Saturday night, and they don't want to encourage Chilul Shabbos, and so instead they push it off to the next day. They say go up on Sunday and Monday instead, but people don't listen, and Lag BaOmer is Hareg Val Yavor, and so many people, feel so strongly about it. Halavai, all those people also feel strongly about Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim. We saw the Chatam Sofer is very critical of those who celebrate Lag BaOmer because it's not a day of miracles. Nothing miraculous happened. Again, people will say, okay, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that's miraculous, but the Chatam Sofer is very critical, and he says that we have an obligation to create a holiday on which there were miracles that befell an individual or a community or the entire Jewish people. Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim are days of clear nisim v'niflaot. They're days of profound religious significance and deserve religious expression and deserve to be celebrated as holidays. So for me, it's so ironic or so tragic that there are so many hundreds of thousands of people going up to Meron and celebrating Lag BaOmer, and they feel so strongly over it, and it's Yareg Val Yavor. And halavai, those same people would feel strongly about celebrating Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim. I think we've said enough this morning about Lag BaOmer. Again, I hope I didn't ruin your Lag BaOmer. As I mentioned, I think there's certainly what to celebrate, this idea of continuity, this idea of Mesorah, this idea of Rabbi Akiva raising up students and having the courage to go on and move forward, and having the strength and passing that Mesorah on to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who then, along with the other students of Rabbi Akiva, replenished the world with Torah. I'll open up now to any questions. Okay, here I'm unmuting you. Okay, any questions? No questions? Okay, well, thank you so much. I wish you all a wonderful day. Take care. Have a great day. All the best.